Zach, I invited you on to my podcast, Necessity versus Commodity, because I bring people on that really separate themselves from the crowd and do something very unique, very special, very important. And I brought salespeople on, business people, had a lot of discussions. I've never brought on somebody, you're the first one that's actually a recruiter. And in the high ticket space, headhunting, recruiting, whatever label you want to put it, isn't really talked about much. And that's why I wanted to really have you on so people can see that, because so much of the high ticket space is, hey, post on social media, get people to know you, build a personal brand, which I think all that stuff is really important. Build a network, where I think is really important. But I think a lot of people really struggle really finding some of the top tier roles. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because you've been doing this for several years very successfully now. So can you give a little brief overview of kind of like your professional journey of where you're at now and kind of maybe the past couple of years of what kind of brought you where you are today?
Yeah. And thanks again for having me on, Scott. It's definitely a pleasure. Looking forward to having a chat with you. So
You're welcome.
after college, I got into collision repair and realized like corporate life, not for me. I actually got my introduction to the high ticket space through MLM, as they sort of run a bit parallel to each other. Got into some digital marketing stuff, and that's what led me into doing some selling and some setting with a few different offers. And didn't have a ton of success with that. Was about to hang it up in January of 2021, after really struggling a little bit to generate some income, because I quit my corporate job to make this happen. And it was 2 weeks before I had prayed. I said, Lord, I'm struggling here. I need help. I don't have direction, nowhere to go. I've tried all these different sales roles, and I'm having a hard time. Did I make a mistake by quitting my job and coming into this space? Like, we had reasons for it. Want to be more present with my child that hadn't even been born yet. And that was my why. And not 2 weeks before I planned to go crawling back to my corporate job, a recruiter that had connected me with a couple of the roles that I had attempted to do asked me to come recruit for him. And so I hopped on board and kind of took to it. So not that it's, the most glamorous role on the face of the planet, but it was paying the bills. And one thing led to another. I did a little bit of job coaching and things in the middle of that. But more or less on and off been doing recruiting exclusively in the space since then, and coming up on 2.5 years. So, and that brings us up to today.
Awesome. When you look at the space of recruiting, it's always interesting talking to people like where they ended up and things that got them there. And I know a lot of people in the space that, and I've been there too, like, God, hey, please, where am I supposed to go? What's the best way to direction that I need to go? Am I in the right space? Because I see people that are making 20, 50, 100K a month. Is this where I want to go? What do I need to do? And so bringing a really unique aspect there, that obviously you're put in a good place, you're having good success. But in the online space, so many people don't even think about working with somebody like you to help them find a job. Why do you see like that's such an important piece of the puzzle that some people might be missing?
It's multifaceted, I think, but the one thing that sticks out more than anything else is, you don't know what you don't know, first and foremost. But I think with salespeople looking for roles, the vetting a lot of times can be really hard to do in the remote space, because we all grew up and we're told, hey, you can be whoever you want to be when you grow up. And some people chose to be liars and oversell their opportunities, which is unfortunately quite rampant in the space. These business owners will do anything and everything, including blur the lines of morality to bring in solid talent. It's, dare I say, an epidemic. And so filtering out the people who actually have legitimate opportunities, that don't have that have where their marketing is not in shambles, and they've got consistent lead flow, their avatar is dialed in, and they're high and tight, is sometimes very difficult to discern from the outside looking in without spending all this time and effort, maybe even starting with the company and finding out 3 weeks later, hey, like I just got rug pulled. Happens all the time. I get messages from reps daily with things like this. So with recruiting, the upside is that a lot of the vetting has been done already, to the point where you can reasonably trust a recruiter, because it's not in their best interest to work with a company that can't support a rep, because that's just going to be an endless cycle of replacements and backfills as the rep comes in, finds out they can't make money, and so they peace out. Now, the downside is that because it is, I don't want to say easier, but you can kind of skip the line in a way, or reduce your amount of effort. So can everybody else. So what people run into is like, you're in competition with a lot of people who want to utilize a recruiter. And that really comes where, it helps to really understand how to interview and how to present yourself. So, you kind of have to take it from both ends.
And you brought up epidemic, and I couldn't agree more that there's a serious problem out there, right? And like, we see it daily in the groups we're in, the people we talk to. Hey, what do you know about this company? Or I just took on this company, it's such a joke. Or hey, what a horrible offer. They told me like this was the potential. Hey, you can make 10K a month. Well, the business isn't even making 10K a month. So in reality, you can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's all of these little pieces in there. And you can't always tell by marketing. And I know it's one of the strategies of like, hey, look at who's marketing, and you can't always tell what's going on behind the scenes until you, like you said, till you sometimes get in there, and the way I look at it is, if I'm looking for a role, if I'm looking at changing a role, whatever it may be, I can spend the next 2 weeks, maybe 2 months trying to find that perfect fit. And then you get in one, and then a month later you find out it's gone. All of a sudden you're 6 weeks to 3 months behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm.
To know I can reach out to you, and you can condense that down to, hey, these 2 roles will be perfect for you. I know the companies are good. To me, that's like a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. So why do you think sometimes in the space that working with somebody like you isn't really discussed?
Well, sort of piggybacking off of what I mentioned a minute ago, it's like, because, so for clarity's sake, as a recruiter, I don't charge people to enter the pipeline on the candidate side. I make money with the business owner. Now, if somebody wants some interview prep, some job coaching, that type of thing, that's all well and good. But to come into the pipeline, it costs $0, and it's always been that way for me in any pipelines that I've worked or have managed, whether on behalf of an agency or myself. So because it's free, everybody can get in. And I had this conversation earlier today, actually, where somebody was a bit upset they weren't getting feedback on why they didn't get picked up from a company they interviewed with. And what I'm seeing a lot of is that there's nothing inherently wrong with these candidates that are interviewing with these positions, but there is an overabundance, a plethora of people applying for jobs. So these business owners, they can have their pick of the litter. They can they can make all of these demands, have all of these criteria, and have all of it met, because there's just people everywhere looking for these jobs, especially the good ones, the ones that can actually deliver on what they're promising. So there is a ton of people that come into my pipeline, but there's only a certain amount that are actually going to be a fit for the pipeline, because the type of companies that typically hire a recruiter, they're in like this little box. They want something sort of specific, and they often have the bandwidth to afford paying for a recruiter. And in addition to that, they also often have the ability to take on someone else. They just don't want to spend the time sourcing the candidate on their own. But on both ends, it's generally a way to sort of skip the line. But at the same time, I think a lot of people get discouraged because they come into the pipeline. I have messaged this yesterday from a guy, came into the pipeline a few months ago, and they hit me back up. I was like, hey, I haven't heard anything. It's like, well, that's because the people that are aggressively reaching out and are saying, hey, I'm ready, let's interview, what do you got for me, top of inbox, when there's infinite number of people coming into the pipeline and I'm one guy, well, guess who's going to get first dibs or who's going to get looked at first? It's the guy that's at the top of the inbox, because that's easier for me. So if they meet the criteria, well, I'm going with them first. I'm not going to go dig through my pipeline and find somebody who's just sitting there waiting on their hands. Like, and plus, that's not even attractive quality. Like, you're saying a lot by saying nothing, which I don't think a lot of people realize. So there's finding that line between not being annoying, but also following up like a pro, and signaling to that recruiter, to that agency, and potentially to that business owner, like, I'm not going to lay down when your prospects tell me no or when they ghost me. It's like the way that you treat everyone in this interview process is the way that they're going to interpret you treating prospects for that particular offer, which I don't think a lot of people realize either. But to sum all that up, I think a lot of people forego getting into a recruiting pipeline because they know it's free, which means everybody else is getting into it and it's competitive. I have had people tell me that too. I'm good. You have way too many people coming into the pipeline. I'm like, you don't even want to try? So that's probably what I would say to the answer to that question. But from my perspective, like, there's a ton of people coming in. So I don't know if I would necessarily say people aren't talking about it, but that's coming from, my perspective and, my little bubble. So that's what I'd say to that.
Well, and I guess not talking about it might be the incorrect verbiage there, or it might be more, it's not, I guess, posted about, discussed, right? And there are those offers out there, right, that the guaranteed placement that everyone knows is kind of BS as well. And I think you bring up a really unique point. It's, hey, just because you are in someone's pipeline doesn't mean that you're going to get placed in the next 24 hours, right? Like, there's a limited amount. And if you're not able to do those little things, that all of a sudden 2 months go by, well, just because you want a pipeline, if I'm not reaching out to you, having discussions with you, if I'm not in front of you, when you kind of talk about posting on social media and things, if I'm not doing the little things, like, you do get kind of put in the rest. It's kind of like what I was on LinkedIn. It was about a month ago, and I read a post of, I don't remember who it was, but was basically talking about, hey, we get 1,000 applicants. It's so easy to get a job and stand out now. We get 1,000. Out of those 1,000, 900 of them don't even respond to a second email. So now you're down to 100 of them. Mm-hmm. Out of those 100, that if you try to set up a time, they tell you 90 of them say that they're busy. Can we push it off a week? That really, out of 1,000, 3 stood out. They were able to limit, cut that down. And it is just doing those basic things: reaching out, sending something personal, following up, being professional, which, again, if you're a sales rep, you should be able to show those things and do those things. And I think a lot of people do miss that aspect as well. What is one thing, is there a specific example you could kind of bring up that maybe is challenging for you, being in your position, kind of that middleman, that when you find you have the right person, you have the right offer, the challenging part of, I guess, making sure that person gets the offer? Because sometimes we feel like it's a perfect situation and doesn't work, right? For one reason or another.
Yep.
So that challenging situation there, what's something that you can kind of maybe discuss there a little bit?
You're opening up Pandora's box here. I've seen it both ways. So to start from the top here, I've introduced people that I'm like, I needed the spot for this interview slot, so here you go. That they're like, oh my gosh, perfect fit. Okay, awesome. I totally did that on purpose. And there's other times where I'm like, slam dunk. These 2 peas in a pod. And it's like, I hate that guy's guts. So, I will defend this till the day I die. Hiring is guessing. You do not know who's going to perform. And anybody that tells you on the contrary, they're either God himself or they got a crystal ball. So that's a thing, a narrative that I see a lot in the space is, oh, we hired this guy, they are going to crush. The only times I've heard that, 2 weeks later, what people fail to do, I would say the biggest mistake on both ends is to not talk about what happens when crap hits the fan. It's very easy to get along with somebody when things are going well. What's not easy is to navigate a new partnership with someone who, when the marketing dries up, or you have to tweak your offer, Facebook shuts your ads down, partner skips out on you, all these things I've seen. And these business owners, they pretend that they don't deal with the same thing that everyone from top to bottom, no matter how big you are and how much revenue you're dealing with, if you're utilizing social media, you deal with the same crap. Mark Zuckerberg runs the show at the end of the day. These ad platforms run the show. And with so much of the sales reps' paycheck being dependent on marketing, which is by nature extremely volatile, you're stepping into something where these business owners many times will be like, well, you can't go 6 months without a paycheck. And a lot of times what they'll do too, this is why I said you're opening up Pandora's box.
Yep.
Is you got business owners are like, I want full-time reps. Okay, well, first and foremost, what does that even mean? Because full-time and part-time do not have an actual definition in this space. If you want to talk about the corporate, more traditional sense, 40 hours. But on a commission-only role where sales reps are only being paid to perform and for results, those two things don't line up. And nearly every single business owner that I've worked with, indirectly or directly, gets this wrong. Not to mention, it is illegal in the United States to dictate a sales rep's time, either when they show up and for how long. Even if it's in the contract, contracts can still be illegal. So there's a plethora of things that both sides are doing wrong. And I know this on the candidate side to try to even this out, because I don't want to crap on business owners only without making sure there's some responsibility on the sales reps side. And I know this because this is what I did. I went into this space thinking that the sale was coming tomorrow. And I would operate and I would live and I would spend money like the money was on its way. When in fact, that couldn't be further from the truth. What I see is a lot of sales reps, they get, and you mentioned this earlier, you go 1, 2, 3 months without making any money and they're behind the 8 ball. They're hurting, they're struggling. Like, I got to make a sale.
Yeah.
Well, that's a terrible place to be in as a commission only sales rep. Talk about commission breath. When you're desperate, prospects can tell, smell it all over you. Not to mention, you're a flight risk for a business owner. When you come in it's going to be a few weeks before that pipeline's built. And not to mention onboarding and training, and then the pay schedule, and then actually hitting your bank account, you're 30, 45 days out minimum from getting paid when you start an offer. And some of these reps, myself included, think, all right, well, I'm going to come in, I'm going to close the deal today. It's going to hit my, they're going to stub it tomorrow, and I'm going to get paid by the end of the week and pay my bills. No. So a lot of these sales reps are under the gun financially because they're not understanding the volatility of the space. And we live in a consumeristic society where we're not, and I wasn't taught this either. I have a 4-year degree. Nobody taught me how to manage money. Yeah. I had to go in the black and in the red deep to figure it out. Basically hit rock bottom. Like, I was living off credit cards for 2 years before finally catching my stride. And I think that on their end contributes to some of the problem where they just can't handle the ups and downs of the marketing. They're not financially stable because they're buying the new iPhone every year. So it's on both ends and I think all of this kind of contributes to the fact that turnover rate is just sky high. Like, I think the most I've ever seen somebody on a roll was like 3 years. Now, I know the space is young, but on average, and this is how it was when I got into the space, it's still this way, 3 to 6 months, if that a rep is staying on an offer. So that is a mission of mine, is to fix that. But it's going to take both parties, sales reps not accepting something that is subpar, business owners not overselling their opportunity, everybody just being open and honest and transparent with where people are at. I've not too long ago actually had a business that was like, we're doing $10,000 a month and we want to hire somebody. I'm like, why? How am I going to sell this? He's like, well, here's the deal. Like, we have, he's like, I'm not a sales guy and my partner is not a sales guy either. Like, we built this cool platform. We've brought in some people, but we just don't know how to close. I was able to find somebody to do that because I was transparent. I was like, hey, this is why they have tons of leads. They have use cases. They have proof of work, and they just need somebody who knows what they're doing. So you can make this work if your business is like not really where you want it to be, because the sales rep knows exactly what they're getting into and they can account accordingly. But all in all, these business owners need to stop demanding that reps show up all day, every day. Dealing with this right now. It's like, hey, they maybe come on full time. They're giving me 2 calls a day, and then they just hire 2 more reps. And they can't feed me. And then they expect those reps to stay. And it's like, you work with me or you work with no one, which again is against the law. So
you brought up several.
There's that word vomit for you.
Yeah, you brought up several really good points there. And so the 3 that I'm thinking about. So talking about the transparency between the 2, I couldn't agree more, especially me having my own brick and mortar business, me having my own online business in the past, me working within and partnering other people and having that online business, as well as also doing high ticket sales for people. I have both views, and it's really interesting the disconnect that goes on out there. Another piece of the puzzle that you kind of brought up of the big thing that we're seeing really now is the fight between being an employee or being a 1099, right? And what you can technically do there. And then the third piece you kind of brought up is certain offers, like, are they good? Are they bad? And so I want to kind of touch base on all 3 of those. So again, with the first part of it, of the business owner and the rep, and I commented on someone's post not too long ago kind of about that hey, when I take an offer, I'm completely transparent with the owner. Most people know me when I show up and I talk to them, and hey, here's how this kind of works. Are you okay with this? Right? They know me, they know what I'm bringing to the table, that there's that respect already there. And I think that's a huge thing. And I think that's an important thing, that we're having a recruiter. Some people are going to be able to go into a position and have a more transparent, open conversation because that recruiter was that person in the middle. But I do see a lot of business owners out there that they are straight up lying to people. And that's a hard thing. It's no different than like a sales rep saying, hey, I'm going to close at 50% for you guaranteed. And then they come in and they can't close anybody, right? And there's risk on both sides, right? Like there's even something in the past week, again, out in our space online of, hey, should you get training first? Should you get a job first? How should you do this? Me being a business owner in the past, if I'm spending $5,000 a month on running ads and I bring somebody in and they can't close anything, not only did I waste that $5,000, but I lost all my revenue for the month. That's a pretty scary place for the business owner as well. Just like talking about the sales rep. And that's where both people have to look at it from both points of view. Hey, just because this person is successful now, you bring on the wrong sales rep, you don't have a business anymore. Or you're really successful right now, as your point is, Mark Zuckerberg changes an algorithm, all of a sudden the marketing tanks, right? And so understanding that pressure from both sides and have people have a good enough conversation. Hey, these are the expectations. Here's what happens going forward. I think is really key. And the big thing out there that you kind of brought up too, of like hey, if I'm a 1099, you can't tell me to be at a meeting. You can't tell me to do this. I can't have to have no, I get to choose. That's what as a 1099 employee, I get to kind of say, hey, this is the way my life is. But is that always setting you up for success as well? Which I don't always think that is. There are a lot of sales reps. Hey, I'm only getting 2 calls a day. I'm not going to do anything else for that person. Well, is that really a good, successful place for the owner as well? And so there's a lot of really good things and bad things I love about this space. And I think there's going to be some major changes legally coming up here shortly. It is going to change that space. We both know there's plenty of talk on that. And I think the industry is going to get forced into kind of one or the other. Now, you kind of brought up the one piece I'd like to talk about right there at the end, where, hey, there was this company, they're only making $10,000 a month. You're like, well, how am I supposed to sell this to someone? How many businesses out there do you see that are at the beginning and you've placed a rep in there and that company went from like, let's say 10 or 20K a month, and then they jumped up to 60K a month because of that rep, and that rep started making a ton of money. And the reason why I'm asking the question, because so many reps are only concern themselves with, hey, this company has to be here, rather than going, hey, this is at the very stages. I'm going to be the only sales rep. I'm going to be able to take all the leads. If I'm doing my job, they're going to scale up, and that's going to bring me in more money. So I can actually dictate me helping that owner actually into a really good offer. So have you been associated with that a lot or not?
Not really. I know it happens, but I think I might have said this earlier, if not, but the type of organizations that will hire a recruiter, they're past that point because they got the money to throw around. So I typically don't. That was kind of a one-off for me. Usually the people that I'm bringing in are doing a couple hundred a month already, or that I'm doing on behalf of an agency, for example, someone that can afford it. So I don't really see that, but I have heard from reps that I've talked to that, they kind of bought into the vision and the mission early on. And actually the guy that really got me started in understanding sales at a deeper level, he was like that. He came in absolute complete savage, and he's sitting as a partner now, and they have an exit plan for the next couple of years, but he's going to make out like a absolute bandit. So 100% happens. I haven't seen a whole lot in my personal travels.
Okay. And the reason why I ask is because I've taken roles like that to help people kind of scale. And I think a lot of people miss the boat on that. So that's why I wanted to kind of get an idea of your experience there. Looking at, you kind of talked about, hey, you kind of started in this industry with MLM, which is a pretty interesting thing. And it's pretty interesting to some of them, how many MLM people are posting stuff. And I don't understand like how they feel like that's going to work. That's a totally different conversation. So you got into that, got into this space. Now you could have done high ticket sales. You could have started your own business. What was kind of the driving force that pushed you towards the actually recruiting and kind of have that passion for that?
I wouldn't say I have a passion for recruiting.
Okay.
I like to win, and I like results. I've had a conversation around this topic with my wife frequently, especially early on. Is my dad, for example, he was 14, fell in love with computers, and he knew right then and there he was going to spend the rest of his life working around computers. My brother, musician, same thing. 9 years old. I love music. Prodigy is a full-time Broadway Nashville musician, absolute killer at music. For me, I didn't have that. I was like, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get a degree. Initially, I was going to go to law school, but that's because people told me I'm good at arguing. And so I was just kind of following what I thought I wanted, or I thought I'd be good at.
Yeah.
But I've said more times than I can count, like I could really see myself doing anything for the most part. I mean, I owned a small lawn care company as a teenager, knocked on doors. I planned on owning a Chick-fil-A franchise when I was working there at a young age. And after that, it was running a body shop and loved that. But, I never really had a quote unquote thing that I could say, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to do this for forever. I just like to work. I like to win. I like to deliver results and, be a part of an organization that's got a mission that goes beyond, the daily grind. So I just kind of fell into recruiting, and it worked, and people just keep asking me to do it. So I keep doing it. But again, it's not glamorous. It's a grind. Like, there's nothing magical about it at the end of the day. And you touched on this earlier. Most people could limp their way through finding people. There's a lot of resources out there if you wanted to spend the time to do it. That's the key, is, do you want to spend the time to do it? What is that going to take away from if you do decide to go down that route? Or is it just easier to invest in, quote unquote, done for you, where reps are going to be dropped right in front of you for you to interview based on what, criteria that you give. So nothing magical. It's just, at the end of the day, we're saving time and helping people make money by being able to focus on the types of activities that will pay them in their business.
So there's a lot of business owners in the space. I know a lot of them. I'm in a lot of masterminds connected. If there's a business owner out there right now that's watching this and they're kind of thinking about, hey, I want to reach out to you to work with you, Now you kind of said, hey, the majority of the people that do that, they're at a space up here rather than, hey, I'm kind of solopreneur. I just kind of want someone to start doing sales for me so I don't have to do those calls. What are the criteria that you look for in a business that you guys will work for and bring people so that they know, hey, I'm a good fit to reach out to Zach?
Yeah, good question. Well, I am a proponent of having, I guess there's two ways to really look at this, but painting with a broad brush, generally speaking, I would prefer, and most sales reps would prefer, that a business have SOPs in place that are dialed in and that are proven. As in, we have X amount of history to show you these are the KPIs. We make X amount of calls a day. We bring in X amount of leads, or spend X amount of dollars on an ad budget, and then be doing that for XYZ amount of time. So proof that there's some legitimacy to the offer or the company that they, or the offer that they're running, or the business that they're operating. So now I say most because there are some reps that actually like helping develop a sales process. They are good at that and don't mind it. But a lot of the issue is that ramp up time. And I think, and you sort of alluded to this earlier, exceptions aside, I do think that most business owners, they try to get an ROI on a hire too quick. I really think you should give it 60 to 90 days, because you want that rep to come in. You want that rep to, if you, let's just for simplicity's sake, say 10K. You want, if that rep wants to make 10K, like that's kind of their goal income, or they're a $10,000 a month level rep and they can prove that on their end. Like, hey, I've done this a bunch of times with a couple of other offers. That means they're bringing in, at, again, simplicity, 10%, which means they're generating your company $100,000 a month. Yep. So you're going to invest, a few $1,000s for a rep, invest time in training, and then get them onboarded. You're probably going to spend time or spend resources and money on what we would call wasted calls, but that really should factor into the long-term investment of that rep. Because if you can hire the right people, and because most business owners, they don't have a problem hiring, they got a problem keeping people. And right. And a lot of times, like I've had people that are like, it's been 3 weeks and you haven't closed anything. The next week, bang, 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 bang. So people, and this is another product of society at large. Also, we're online and we feel like we're always behind the 8 ball because everybody's driving a Lambo and everybody's doing this and doing that, making all this money. And we're like, well, I should be there already. So we're trying to expedite a result that can't be expedited. Like, people need time to orient themselves around a new culture, a new offer, a new prospect. And if you need them to make money ASAP, then I would question the financial health of your company. It's like, you're talking about human capital here. This is the most complex investment anyone's ever going to make. This is something that has a soul and can talk back and can leave you high and dry if you're not careful. So at the end of the day, a lot of these business owners, they're wearing 16 hats. Okay. The unlimited things that they have to think about and do and be good at in order to make an online business like this run. And managing people is one of them, which often needs somebody who to a deep level understands the human condition and understands how to develop a self-awareness of, hey, if I do this, this is the effect it's going to have on that other person. And I don't think I see a lot of them in this space. It's all about, hey, you need to be producing. It's cogs at the end of the day. And they know that, hey, if you don't work out, I can go find somebody else, because I interviewed 6 people. And at the end of the day, too, they're hiring a recruiter. Typically, it's like a 30-day window, which honestly, I've been tossing around making it a 90-day window, but instead of a 30-day. But I absorb a lot more risk doing it that way because of all the reasons that I just mentioned. But when you have a 30-day window, if you have used a recruiter, not only are you spending all this money on calls, training them, onboarding, you spent money on the hire. You start getting close to that 30-day mark. You're like, all right, if I want the backfill, if I want the replacement, I got to fire him now. So there's just, again, multifaceted, but I think a lot of it is the issues coming where there's just not understanding that the rep has to make money. And you mentioned earlier, you started with this guy who's in the ground level. I'd be curious to know if you were financially stable at that point and didn't need the money. because that's, I think, a lot of the problem too, is these guys need money. And so they can't afford to, buy into the mission. It's like paycheck first. So
Correct. Well, and
those are the thoughts I
to
have on
answer
that.
that question too, there have been certain situations where I've negotiated the contract where they're giving me a base,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, hey, if we're going to do this and you say this, so this base is negotiated, right? And the same thing with the sales commission. Okay, there's going to be a tiered bonus for every single week, right? Type of scenario. And so if I'm going to put my financial needs and goals and off to the side and not put them first and put your business success number one, well, there needs to be a little take and give there. And I think you brought something up really interesting, earlier, just kind of talking about, hey, this is where some businesses are, you should have these key pieces in place. And, one of the masterminds I'm in is a lot of the individuals are solopreneurs. They might have a VA or two, a few this and that, and it was just a couple of weeks ago, someone's like, hey, I'm looking at hiring a sales rep. What would does anybody know one? How would I interview this person? Right. This is someone that has never done it at all. And a lot of the comments on there just blew my mind of the lack of looking at that salesperson actually as another human being. And so the thing that I said is, if you're bringing on a sales rep, number one, you need to look at yourself and look at your business. Number one, and you kind of said to it, I said, you have to expect that person's not going to close anything for the next 90 days. Because that's a worst case scenario. Is that what you're hoping for? No, you're hoping that in the first week or two, that person is closing deals, you're making money. But in reality, if you're bringing somebody on, depending where you're in a business, and if you're just starting off, you're not going to get someone of extremely high talent that's going to come in to take one call a day, right? Type of scenario, right? So you have to understand the person you're bringing on, the skill level they're going to have, it's going to take them longer to ramp up. Now, having the SOPs in place, knowing what the KPIs are. The other thing is having an onboarding process. If you don't have those pieces, that's huge. Now, the next thing is, do you have time in your schedule to still take sales calls for yourself so you don't tank out and not make any money for the next 90 days? Worst case scenario. Are you able to actually lead that person, train them in sales, coach them, help them? Are they okay with doing that with you as another part? Because a lot of sales reps are like, dude, if I'm taking 1 or 2 calls a day, I'm not showing for a sales meeting, right? And there's that whole weird thing there too that I don't even want to get into on that. I mean, I think sales meetings for offers every single day, 3 days a week, I think are a necessity. That's how you build a real team and a real company, a real corporation. Are they needed with everything? No, they're not. But when you have a better offer and you have a business in place, you normally have those SOPs in place. So it's easier to onboard people. But I've also seen a lot of those businesses don't have any onboarding at all. It's like, hey, just you go. Here's your calendar. Let's go. And if you're setting a person up that way, you're in my mind, you're setting up for failure.
For sure.
So there's a lot of kind of back and forth and that really needs to be done. And I think a sales rep needs to look in the mirror, and I think business owners need to look in the mirror to kind of go back with, from the very beginning of the conversation of having open dialogue. And I think that's another reason why having a recruiter like yourself for the business owner or for the sales rep, you get both sides. You are going to help someone, clear that bridge a lot quicker, which I think in this space is really important. I think it's interesting you brought up, because I have met some business owners and they were interviewing me to figure out if I wanted to work for them. And one of the guys, when I was asking, like, okay, so how many reps do you have right now? He's like 5. And we were going through the conversation. He's very successful. They're making like $1 million a month. And okay, cool. How come you're hiring now? Out of the 5 you have, what's the average that they're making? And the sales are getting the sales call. So I got those numbers. And then one of the other questions I asked was, so out of the top 3 people that you have, how long have they been with you? The one guy goes 18 months. Another one was 5 years. Okay, cool. That tells me a lot about the systems of the company, the stability of the company, because again, marketing changes all the time. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we had Ad Apocalypse where Facebook changed an algorithm,
Yep.
everything shut down for like the month of August, right? And if you're
Right.
if you have a business and your only thing is running ads get shut off, everyone's dead in the water.
Right.
And so having those key pieces in place, looking at, the next 12, maybe 24 months of the industry, how do you see things changing from AI to more people coming into space than ever?
Yep.
There is a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of distrust from all ends. So how do you see some of that changing over the next 12 to 24 months?
I see those things sort of, and obviously this is conjecture, but taking a similar route to the way that I've seen appointment setting. When I got into the space, appointment setting wasn't as popular as it is now. Everyone was running ads to book in a calendar. Well, they realized like, hey, it's getting more competitive. Our marketing needs more nurture time, and we got to introduce a human being earlier on because that's what people want. Well, in my opinion, the SDR role, the setter role, however you want to label it, has been completely crapped on. People have so devalued it to the point that, like, as a recruiter, it's twice as hard to find a good SDR than it is to find a closer, because it's a grind and the pay sucks. So I think what I'm noticing now, coming full circle, is the tides seem like they're starting to change, where people are recognizing I can't pay these guys $500 a month base and then 2% commission. So I'm seeing 2,500, 3K base, which is borrowing a lot from a lot of your corporate structured SDRs, which 3, 4, 5K base. So in that way, I see sort of AI introducing itself to where we're going to go too far, where everyone's going to try to automate the crap out of everything to save on the bottom line, to where it's like, you're not talking to anybody but an AI. AI is going to close my deals. And I think that in the same way it was for like the pandemic, where everyone was like, cool, we could all get to work from home. Now everybody's missing each other. We're missing that actual energy. I think this is what's going to happen too, is we're going to get all the way over to this side, and then it's going to come back to the middle, where it's a hybrid model where you've got your sales reps that are being assisted by AI, because I really do think that people buy from people. And I could be flat out wrong about this, but I do think that at the end of the day, we're divinely wired to want human connection. And I don't, unless AI gets stupid good, I don't see that changing.
Yeah, AI has no soul, right? And I've seen a lot of more posts, especially the last 60 days, and people really inquiring about it, or being nervous about it, or am I going to lose my job because AI is taking over? And I agree. Like, there's a big hype on it. A lot of people, and it is a tool like anything else.
Right.
And how that tool is used is gonna differentiate a lot. But when it looks like AI, for an example, we have many chats. We have Alex Ramosey's Alan AI. Go high level. We have automations in AI that already have been doing this for years. Right. So it's nothing new. Now the AI is getting better at responding. But in this space, how many people buy from just conversations by text message or direct message or email? Right? There are some companies that have that process and it works really well for them. Majority of them don't.
Right.
And the AI is going to speed up the process, get people better informed. It's going to kind of, the way I see it, the way that the webinar funnel used to work 5 years ago, right? Hey, run an ad, people watch a webinar, book on a call with you. And basically that webinar and that whole piece is like getting people information, like they've been following you for 6 months, or maybe they read their book, or right. It's taking you from unknown to, yes, they fully know who you are and they're in the right space, within a couple of days. I think AI is going to help that the same way. It's going to be able to have a conversation, send information, those pieces. So then when a person does take over, which will need to happen, and it could be a setter at that point, then to really disqualify, or maybe it goes right to a closer. And I do see it going that way, but it's not going to eliminate the human aspect. I agree with you, because everyone's going to want that. Even some of the AI it's out there right now, that you can really have a computer generated avatar of you that looks 98% just like you.
Yeah.
right? And you can just type in whatever,
Right.
and you can get to a point where you're going to have AI videos that you're going to have a dialogue like you and I are, but it's still AI.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still going to pull the logical stuff, and you can do that, but it's never going to, I'm not going to say never, but it's not going to replace a human. And if it does, it's going to be a long, long time from now.
Agreed. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I had somebody tell me not too long ago that AI would reduce the need for A plus plus level sales talent, to where your B plus players, your middle of the road guys, can excel because of all of the layups that they're getting with the AI assists. And he was saying that because as AI gets introduced, and the need for a exceptional sales rep potentially diminishes, so will the pay. Because it's like, hey, if I don't need you to do as much, then you're not going to get paid as much, which is not going to attract the guys that are upper echelon, top shelf. It's going to attract more of your average players, but it's going to work out well. So it was interesting to hear him say that, but I'd be curious how you think the level of talent needed to perform with AI assisting would potentially shake things up, if at all.
It's a very interesting question, and it can go a lot of different ways. So number one, I'm just going to use me as an example. I don't hop on a sales call unless I'm 99% sold. I pretty much already decided I'm buying this. I've done all the research already, right? And as an example, I was on a sales call last week, knowing that I didn't purchase that day, but when I talked to that sales rep, I'm like, I just want to let you know, Robert, that as you fill out your stats, it was on a Friday. So as you fill out your stats for the weekend for today, mark this down as a win, even though you didn't collect cash. Right? Because you did win the call. I could tell that you're doing NEPQ, and I even kind of coached him a little bit on a few different
nice.
And we had a really good conversation. I said, I don't want you to feel like I wasted your time, because I come to these calls and pretty much made a decision. This is something I want to do. I need some further information to figure out if it's something and when I'm going to do it. And so you did awesome, and that was great. The reason why I'm using that is because I think AI is going to help people to come to a call in that situation a lot more often, right? And that's what I kind of mean, kind of like the webinar, where, hey, people are coming to calls way more prepared.
Right.
It was easier, right, than just, hey, here's my phone number, I'm interested in your service, and just I have to call 1,000 people to do it. So I think AI is going to help speed that process up. It's going to help with follow-up, so and all those little pieces that humans are doing now, or advertising is doing now. So if that's the case, if AI is doing that, it's going to save the owner money, a lot of money. So I don't see it actually directly. So the potential is there to adjust the closer's rate. But if we use an example now of like a $10,000 offer, you're running ads to it, you have a setter and a closer on it, that owner is probably spending $4,500 for every close, all said and done, right?
Yep.
So if we can cut that down to only 1,500 or 2,000, they just brought in an extra $1,500, $2,500 because of AI. That's a game changer financially. It's a game changer for everybody. That will be a trickle down type of piece of where, if you see it in like sports, right? The guys that are the superstars make tons of money.
Yep.
Right. So I see it possibly will change. Now, if I use an example, yeah, people are coming onto the call more prepared. They're there. This is why I don't see AI really being able to, take over a human right now. If people are that prepared, the A player is actually going to be closing 95%, rather than the B plus player closing 60%. That's still a 35% difference.
Right.
So I don't see it changing the hierarchy at the moment. But I do agree with you. It is going to change that overall perception.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to raise everybody up, which is huge. Right? It's no different than this AI in general. Kind of like when Google came out. Everyone has all the information in the world to possibly do anything with.
Mm-hmm.
AI didn't change that. It just made it quicker to access the information we were looking at rather than having to read through a bunch of stuff. So it's going to help us accelerate things quicker, but it doesn't remove the human element. And it's actually going to push us farther, quicker, faster. And I think there'll be some business that will be able to grow and scale faster because of AI, because you're saving some money, all of those pieces. So it's a really interesting thing. And I could see it going completely the other way too. Like you said, all of a sudden, and here I'll use another one of my examples of I sold health insurance out of a call center for about 2 years. That was right before Obamacare took over.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sales reps, right? So they ran ads on TV. Basically, I was licensed in 48 states. People would call in. It was a one call close type of deal, right? Like, boom, need to figure out this person's problem, if we can actually help them, if getting insurance even makes sense, right? Like, you have someone that's getting insurance for their whole family from their employer for $500 a month. I'm gonna insure their whole family for $1,500. Dude, you're in the wrong spot. Go somewhere else, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to switch that. So you have to figure those type of things out. Now, when Obamacare took over, because of all the adjustments, they stopped doing individual medical policy, so we all got laid off. But they have people on staff now that are essentially just assistants to say, we've got this policy or this policy. Does this work for you? Right. And so there will be some changes in some offers, some parts of the industry that is going to take out the sales rep aspect. But the other piece of that is this is also going to open up a lot of doors we don't even see yet that sales reps will definitely need to be there. So there's always going to be those spaces, but it is going to be something that people are going to have to navigate kind of correctly through. And also, I think setters, closers, business owners, if you're not looking into AI and not just ChatGPT, like all of AI, to see what's out there, you're going to be behind the 8 ball in 6 to 12 months when other people have started using other aspects of automation for their business or their sales process that makes them get 2 to 10 times the amount of work done as you.
Yep.
Right. Because again, if I'm a sales rep and I'm using AI for aspects of me closing deals for whatever offer I'm on, and I can close twice as many deals as somebody else, and the owner doesn't need to pay for the marketing, who are they going to bring on?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that could adjust where B players, C players could potentially be benefiting AI, which gets them actually more. They might not have as high of a close rate as an A player, but because they're maximizing other things, they're actually bringing in more revenue with less money being spent by the company. Who are you going to keep?
Right. They're more efficient.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of different variations there that could really change the whole, basically shift the whole paradigm of where things are at. And I think it's a really interesting time and really cool where things could go. And I think that's going to be one thing, just looking at business owners as well, and sales reps picking owners, and vice versa, of, hey, what are you actually truly bringing to the table? Because you brought up something earlier that really does suck. And it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast of, be irreplaceable. Of so many sales reps, setters are just looked at as just a commodity from business owners. And because sales reps instead have been treated that way, they're starting to treat business owners the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And then business owners are getting upset. Like, dude, this guy came on, blah, blah, blah. He quit after 6 weeks to go to a different offer. Well, why is that? It's because they've been crapped on for so long. They don't trust you. You don't have any open dialogue. You're not working with this person transparently, or maybe you lied up front, or you don't know how to lead as an individual. You don't have a culture. You don't have standard operating procedures. There's nothing here that makes this person go, this is a good, stable environment.
Right.
Right. And I also see from the owner's standpoint, like, these guys are just, wild, wild west. They come in and out, blah, blah. I don't want to deal with that either. And I think that's a great place for you as a recruiter as well, that now as a sales rep and a business owner, you don't feel like you're running around chasing chickens.
Mm-hmm.
and you can actually bring everybody in line and bring people together to actually become very successful together. And that's why I think your role for what you do in the space is absolutely amazing. And looking at that role piece, what's the biggest hurdle and struggle that you felt like you've encountered the past, I don't know, 12 months?
Like with recruiting?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know if I have anything that I hadn't already said as far as like struggles that I deal with. I do think though, to your point just a minute ago, that it makes me being hard on somebody on either end more palatable, because they know like, hey, I don't win unless you win and you win. So that helps my case a little bit, to where it's like, hey, I can be straight up with you and I can tell you you're being a bonehead right now, and you need to fix it if you want this to work. Because I do have, admittedly a selfish agenda. I mean, that's how I make my money, is two people finding each other. But and you said this at the beginning of the call, I do wish more people like understood that recruiting isn't magic. Like I've seen this all over the place, where it's like, hey, like, why isn't this person like doing well? Like, you brought them to me. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I can't tell you, and I have in my contracts, like, I don't guarantee performance, but there's still this unsung expectation that, hey, if I hire a recruiter, that means they're going to perform. And it's like, no. There is infinite number of variables at play that contribute to whether or not somebody performs. And it's like, think about what you're asking me. You're asking me to tell you that this is you're asking me to promise you that this person's going to perform. Realistically, it's like, once you hire them, it's like you've decided that this is a good fit for your company. And I even, to be frank, I don't care for the backfill windows. I don't even think that, like, that's honestly a lot of risk on the recruiter's part, but we do it because business owners aren't going to, they're not going to bite without having some sort of contingency. I think at the end of the day, to tie up your question with a cute little bow, is that I really just wish people were not trying to milk a relationship as much as possible. Like, they're willing to go 100, but like, and you kind of alluded, this business owners are like, well, I'm not going to invest in you until you start converting deals. And the sales reps like, well, I'm not going to, hunt down, go through your pipeline until you start feeding my calendar. So, it's on both ends, like we've talked about, throughout this call, they both need to shape up. And I think it's just, people need to be realistic about the space that we're in and be like, you know what? We're all on the same page here. We all want to make money. We all want to do well. We all want to provide value. We all want to be here because this space is better than the corporate world in infinite number of ways. So it's like connecting on the things that we agree on. And it's like, you don't have to be best buds with this person, but who's saying you can't get along on a professional level to the point where you sacrifice self for the sake of the mission? Obviously not to the point where it's self-deprecating and you put yourself in a bind, but to the extent where you would if you were on a Navy SEAL team, like laying it down, my preferences for what's good for the company and the prospect at large, because they're really who this is all about. Is like, we're serving people and it needs to be about that, but it also needs to be done in a way where everyone can continue to do it and be thinking about longevity in a space that is like anti-longevity. So that's what I'd say to that.
You brought up an interesting thing there, and I was actually having a conversation with another gentleman in the space, and he has a business partner, and he was kind of asking me some questions like, hey, you've had your own businesses, you have some business partners, you have experience. I want to get your advice on something. And so basically the answer I told him is, you have to look like a business relationship, just like you do a marriage. And I think the same thing is when it comes down to a sales rep and a business owner. You bring up the longevity aspect. Hey, it's all very volatile, right? Divorce is volatile. 50% of people get divorced after just a few years. Like it is crazy. And I think the space needs to treat every relationship, and it's how I treat everybody in the space, is essentially like a marriage, to where I have to have the discussion to tell you that I trust you 100%, that every decision you make, you think of me first, the business second, yourself third.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if I'm working for a business owner and I say, hey, I trust every decision that you make, you're thinking of me first, thinking of the business second, and yourself third, I will always do the same for you. If you have the open transparency and say, cool, because now we both trust each other that everything that you do is for the good of everybody involved. And it also opens up the conversation then. If you see if a business owner is making a decision about something and comes to me and says, hey, Scott, this is what we're going to do. And I go, well, that actually is going to affect me in a negative way financially. Yes, it is going to. That's why I'm coming to you and having a discussion first. But here's why we're doing it, because long term, it's going to be more beneficial to you.
Yeah.
Cool. Now we had that conversation, right? Because I had trust. So now that opens that door to be transparent. And that's where people come up to sales call. They don't trust sales reps. They don't trust the business owners. Sales reps don't trust the business owner. Business owners don't trust the sales reps, right? Like it's this whole thing that's all built on distrust because of so much poor marketing out there that's been so deceptive over the years, which I see that changing now, which is really awesome. And it's because of people like you and people in the space that are out there talking about it every single day, because people have to change, because now a lot of the business owners have to change the way that they're approaching sales reps, approaching the marketing, because otherwise they're not going to be successful.
Right.
And it is a big volatile situation, but I think that's with any industry when it first starts. And this industry is kind of, like you alluded to earlier, in its infancy. So what's something about yourself, not professional, but personal, about you that maybe someone doesn't know, or something that, to shed a little bit light more on who you are as a person rather than just a recruiter?
A lot of people look at me sideways when I tell them that I never went to public school day in my life, other than university. I was homeschooled the whole way, oldest of 5, stay-at-home mom, schooled us all in our play den. So yeah, that's probably what comes top of mind.
I think that's awesome. What benefits did you get out of that? I think there's a ton of them.
Well, I plan on doing it with my 2 boys, and however many other kids come along that the Lord blesses us with. There's ways to, there's some things that I liked about it and some things that I didn't. I think in the homeschool communities, which is often, comes with a lot of faith-based communities, there's a level of fear that comes from exposing your kids to, the world. And if I had to pick one downside, I would say that the exposure to, the real world came too late. Needed to be introduced earlier on, to educate and help in those developmental years. Like, hey, look, this is how we're choosing to live our lives, and this is how we want to operate, and this is what the world does. And especially as Christians who love Jesus. And the good with that is, I actually feel like I learned some stuff, and even though I do feel like some exposure could have happened a bit earlier, at the same time, I'm thankful for it, that I didn't get into the wrong crowds. And that my parents were able to say, hey, look, this is what we want to make sure you're educated on. And I don't think that the system, if you will, adequately prepares people for children for the real world in a lot of ways. But again, there's still some of that with schooling as well. So I liked it in that we just had a lot more flexibility over the schedule, and we weren't gone all day. I got to hang out with my siblings, develop more strong relationships with them, good relationship with my parents, and overall, just be protected from a lot of stuff that kids shouldn't be exposed to early on. So it's kind of like, there's a balance there on both ends.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And having 2 little ones in my life as well that have been homeschooled in the past, and they're going to be going to public school this year. There's a tear in between of like, I'd rather be homeschooling them, but at the same time, it is an environment that is going to benefit them a ton. And I think also there then is more responsibility on myself to make sure that I'm still schooling them and educating them the way that they should be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on whether it be truth or facts or a way of handling yourself, whether it's Christian belief in God, which is completely taken out of a public school, right?
Yeah.
How you conduct yourself and all these other pieces that give you well-rounded, because you're right, school's not going to teach you everything. We both know that, right? Life is going to teach you a lot of things. And if you don't focus on some of the school part, you'll have a lot of life experience, but might not have other pieces. So I think we really go good hand in hand. And I think that's really cool that you were homeschooled your whole life. And I think that's changing. I think that's going to be more the norm here for this generation that's coming up. So,
yeah, for sure.
Well, Zach, I want to make sure I respect your time. I can't thank you enough for coming on today.
Of course. Yeah, it's absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
And I would love to have you come on again. And when I do kind of post this too, of, the next time, maybe we can even reach out to, our networks and saying, hey, we're going to have this discussion around this. Is there anything specific people really want to hear about now that they know what you do, what you're about? And I think we can get some really good conversation going to give people a little bit more insight of what you know about the space. I think it'll be awesome.
Yeah, sounds like a blast. Again, appreciate your time, Scott. Thanks so much for having me on.
You're very welcome. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, you too.